A Skeptic Walks into a Haunted House by Kevin Has Opinions. When it comes to the supernatural, I've always been a skeptic. But something strange happened to me during my freshman year at Indiana University. And to this day, I still can't explain it. It starts the way that most adventures start, with some really stupid friends. Sean, Dan, and Javier. These guys were on my floor at the dorm, and we were a crew the first night of college. Eating cheeseburgers together in the dining hall, talking all night about girls, drugs, and girls. And in October, when the air grew crisp and the campus trees turned a brilliant gold, Sean got into the Halloween spirit and said that we should camp out at the Kilroy House. If you're from Indiana, then you know about the Kilroy House. If you're not a Hoosier, the short version of the story goes like this. The carnival came to the small farming town of Bowling Green, Indiana in 1930. The carnival's fortune teller, who was this beautiful Romanian woman, got knocked up by a wealthy and already married farmer named Jeb Kilroy. When the carnies left town, this beautiful fortune teller saw a chance at long-term comfort on Jeb's dime, and she stayed behind. She rented a room and set up shop in Bowling Green because she thought once the kid was born, this guy was going to leave his wife. Now, of course, the town raised its collective eyebrows at this. And Jeb Kilroy, the fine, upstanding adulterer that he was, knew that he had to end it. So he stopped downtown to the room she was renting and told the fortune teller to leave town that night, that she could never prove that the baby was his. The fortune teller slit Jeb's throat from ear to ear. Then she dragged his body 3 miles back to his house and murdered his wife and their 2 small children in the exact same way. She staged the family's bodies around the dinner table, roasted one of the farmer's piglets alive, and then plattered it as a centerpiece. And then for dessert, she hanged herself from the dining room rafter. It was a week until the neighbors downwind came to check the smell. I want everyone to take a moment. Maybe you're reading this on your phones or on your work computer. Stop for a moment and close your eyes. Imagine this. 7 days of sunrises and sunsets, the leaves falling outside, a woman hanging over a throat-slit family, holding dominion over them in the dead of night, in the middle of the afternoon, the sunlight stretching from window to window, the long, groaning creaks as she swayed on the rafter, the echo of the bloody, hardwood floors. Now, some facts about the Kilroy house. No one's lived there for more than 3 months since 1958, which is as far back as the records go. The house has been bank property since 1983. College kids still go and visit it, reporting cold rooms, spectral noises, and all that Unsolved Mysteries Halloween episode type stuff. Now, I've always been a skeptic, so when Sean told me, Dan, and Javier that he wanted to go spend the night at the Kilroy house, I was going to be cool for it. Like, sure, let's go. Prove to you idiots that it's going to be 2 things, dumb and boring. We packed into Sean's car from our dorm at Wright Hall, and before we even left the parking lot, Javier, who was from Spain, unrolled a baggie of mushrooms from his pocket. He was like, "Super magic, man." Sean and Dan were like, "Now, we're definitely gonna see something, Kevin." We ate the mushrooms on the way over to the Kilroy house. And this is the part of the story where I become an unreliable narrator. It took us an hour of driving country roads to find the Kilroy house, and when we do, it's exactly what everyone had described to us. This old, sturdy Pennsylvania Dutch, simple 2 stories, 4 windows along the top, and a little chimney poking right out of the middle. It was the kind of house that looked like it was drawn by a competent, unimaginative child. But it was strong, made of stone, and I think it'll be standing long after everything else in this world has turned to dust. Before we went in, we took our time outside. Now, I didn't believe in any of it, but I remember how it felt. Every instinct that I had was telling me to get back into the car and go to some party instead, and then I heard the boards creaking from the inside. I told myself that it was just the effect of the shrooms, so I shook it off and walked up the stairs. And I opened the door. Right away, something about the house was just not right. A Pennsylvania Dutch is wide, but it's not deep. This house was deep. And it wasn't super obvious, but it felt like there were a couple of extra back rooms that shouldn't have been there. As though the house was bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. I didn't really believe what I was seeing. I just thought it was Javier's mushrooms. Anyway, my friends stumbled into the porch with the flashlights, camping lantern, the sleeping bags, the beer, and the weed. And when I turned back around, those extra rooms weren't there anymore. Just a normal, run-of-the-mill abandoned murder house. No big deal. I'll spare you all the dialogue from 4 18-year-olds, out of their mind on hallucinogens in the middle of nowhere. What I will tell you is that written in dust on the mantle of the fireplace was my full name, Kevin Joseph Vandevoorde. I laughed and told my friends that the wipeout was a nice touch. 1997 or 98 would have been too on the nose, so good job. They insisted, though, that they didn't do it and said that I did, and maybe I did. I was too high to argue. As we explored the first floor, the boards inside the house really began to creak. It could have been the wind outside, but whatever, it was really loud. So loud that we had to raise our voices over it. We heard a crash from upstairs, and then another one. So we huddled around the lantern. The creaking, it just got deafening. Then everything did eventually calm down. The wind died down, maybe. Anyway, we could speak at a normal volume again. Sometimes, when I toy with the idea of believing in this, I wonder if the house realized that it was coming on too strong. So it took a break and bored us enough to make us open our beers and roll out our sleeping bags. Maybe it needed us to stay. Eventually, we each passed out, one by one. I don't know if I was the last, but I was the last to wake up. When I did, the boards were creaking again. It was probably 3 a.m, and I heard moaning. And it took me a second to realize that it wasn't a dream. It was my friend Dan. I opened my eyes, and the fortune teller was there, dangling from a rope that vanished before it touched the ceiling. My hallucination was borrowing pretty heavily from zombie films because she was rotted, dressed in tatters, and she didn't have eyes. She didn't speak. She just hovered over Dan and pointed at him as he wept. Sean shone the flashlight at her. She spun to face him. Then she pointed a long, cracked fingernail at him next. After that was Javier, and when she pointed at him, he just stared off into the distance. He went full vegetable. And then it was me. And when I looked into her eyes, they were 1,000,000 miles deep. So we got out of there fast. And listen, it was just the mushrooms. And yeah, we all saw it, or whatever. But when you're high and you're all talking crazy, a pretty unverifiable account becomes the official record and truth for the entire evening. Shared hallucinations, they're not real. Freshman year friends are funny. You know, you're friends for a while and then you join a new club, meet some girls, and you don't see those original guys all that much. Because it takes a couple of tries for you to find the right people at college. Javier accelerated that process because he switched dorms the next week. As far as I know, none of us ever saw him again. Dan died of alcohol poisoning at a party at the end of the semester. People who were at the party said that he was out of control, that he was flunking out of school, that he was slamming a mix of Everclear and NyQuil. There was even an article in the student newspaper the next week telling everyone not to do that. When I heard that he died, the next thing I thought was the fortune teller. Anyway, you grow up, you get a job, you meet your wife, have a child. You still never forget that one bad trip that you took. It's even harder to forget when you look up an old friend on Facebook and learned that he shot himself in his garage. in the same Dodge Duster that you sped away from that old house in. And I didn't know Sean anymore. He was just a stranger whose profile was full of memories and rips. I didn't leave one. I can't find Javier. There are no records of him, no graduation, no proof of residence, nothing. Even though I don't believe in this, I still blow $40 a month on one of those internet record searches. And that's the thing. Statistically, 2 dead friends and 1 missing is bound to happen to somebody, especially to someone who was the only stable guy in this crew. But I still can't get the image of that dead woman out of my head and the endless void of her eyes. And she comes back to me a lot. Empty restrooms at work, late-night parking garages, a glimpse of her in the mirror while I'm reading my little boy a bedtime story. It always turns out just to be a shadow or the dog. And I'm still a skeptic. But sometimes I'm not so sure.